Maeve's Secret, When the Loving Wife Was the World's Hidden Queen. Subscribe now. Before we start this jaw-dropping tale, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Imagine this: the quiet, loving, everything-for-you wife. What if she was secretly one of the wealthiest people on the planet? For 7 years, Scarlett Hayes lived a simple life, hiding her billionaire identity for the man she loved. She traded boardrooms for charity bake sales, haute couture for bargain racks, all for a husband who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. When he discarded her for a richer woman, he thought he was upgrading. He had no idea he had just thrown away a diamond for a shard of glass. This is the story of how a hidden heiress, betrayed and broken, unleashed her true power and returned to bulldoze his world. Are you ready for a journey of vengeance and rebirth that will challenge everything you believe about love and power? Join me for this incredible transformation. The Gilded Cage. To the outside world, Scarlett Hayes was painfully ordinary. She lived in a modest 2-story home in a quiet suburb of Savannah, Georgia, a city known more for its historic charm than its ultra-rich orbit. Her days were a quiet rhythm of tending her small garden, volunteering at the local library, and cooking elaborate meals for her husband, Adrian Clark. She drove a reliable 5-year-old Toyota, clipped coupons, and her biggest indulgence was a weekly latte from the local cafe, The Daily Grind. She was sweet, unassuming, and completely devoted to the man she had married 7 years ago. Adrian was the center of her universe. He was handsome, ambitious, and possessed a charisma that could charm the most hardened cynic. He worked as a mid-level financial analyst at a respectable but unremarkable firm downtown. To his colleagues, he was a man on the rise, sharp and hungry, but held back by his humble circumstances. He often lamented his luck in life, talking about grand ambitions that seemed ludicrously out of reach. If only I had the capital, he'd sigh to work friends over cheap beers. I could be running this city. What no one knew, least of all Adrian, was that the woman he came home to every night, the woman who mended his socks and meticulously managed their tight budget, was not Scarlett Hayes, the orphan she claimed to be. She was Scarlett Sinclair, the sole heiress to the Sinclair global conglomerate, a worldwide empire with stakes in tech, real estate, and energy, valued at over $2.50 billion. Scarlett had met Adrian during her final year at the University of Georgia, where she studied art history under an assumed name, desperate to taste normalcy after a childhood suffocated by tutors, bodyguards, and the cold, calculating world of high finance. Her parents, Edward and Elaine Sinclair, had been brilliant but distant figures, more comfortable in a boardroom than a playroom. They had died in a private jet crash when she was 18, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Mrs. Augusta Sinclair, and as the sole heir to their vast fortune. Overwhelmed by the weight of her inheritance and the world's prying eyes, Scarlett had devised a plan to escape, if only for a while. Adrian, then a scholarship business student, was everything her world was not. He was passionate, saw her for who she was, and seemed unconcerned by wealth or status. When he proposed a simple life away from the glittering pressures of the elite, Scarlett saw it as a romantic fantasy come true. She believed she had found a man who loved her, not her name. And so, with a sinking heart, but a hopeful spirit, she made a choice. She placed her entire fortune into a blind trust, accessible only by a complex series of protocols known to her and her family's most trusted counsel, Mr. William Ruiz. She told Adrian a fabricated story of a lonely childhood in a forgotten orphanage and adopted her new identity as a woman with nothing but her husband's love. For 7 years, she played the role perfectly. She found true joy in anonymity. Watching Adrian strive, she felt a sense of pride. She believed she was supporting his dreams, that their love was a fortress built on a foundation sturdier than money. But the cracks had begun to show in their fortress. Adrian's ambition, once a quality she admired, had curdled into bitter resentment. He grew tired of their modest life. He began making snide remarks about her simple clothes, their budget vacations, and her lack of connections. "Did you see David Chen's new fiancée's ring?" he'd comment after a work event, his eyes gleaming with a greedy light. "Must be 10 carats. Her father is a shipping magnate from Singapore." He would then look down at Scarlett's simple gold band, a symbol of the life he now disdained, and his lip would curl into a slight sneer. He began working late, attending networking events that left him smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He grew distant, his touch infrequent and superficial. The easy laughter that once filled their small home was replaced by a tense silence, punctuated by Adrian's heavy sighs of dissatisfaction. Scarlett felt the change deep in her bones. A cold dread began to pool in her stomach. She tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but her gentle inquiries were met with irritation and accusations. "What is there to talk about, Scarlett?" he snapped one night, tossing his briefcase onto the dining table she had so carefully set. "We're stuck. We're going nowhere. I'm suffocating, and you're content to just float along." "I thought we were happy," she whispered, her heart aching. "I thought this was what you wanted." "I wanted a partner," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Not a housekeeper. I need someone who can help me. Someone with resources." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Resources. It was a word that had defined her entire life, a word she had run from, only to have it thrown back in her face by the man she had sacrificed everything for. She looked at Adrian, the stranger before her, his face twisted by a greedy ambition she had never truly seen before. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt the ghost of Scarlett Sinclair stir within her. The game that began as a romantic escape was about to become a brutal war, and she was the only one who knew the true power of the weapons at her disposal. 2. The D-Day dismissal. The final blow came on a crisp October afternoon, the air carrying the smell of wood smoke and decaying leaves. It was their 7th wedding anniversary. Scarlett had spent the entire day preparing a feast, a recreation of their first date, handmade pasta, a rich bolognese sauce she had slow-cooked for hours, and a splurge bottle of Chianti. She wore a simple blue dress he once said was the color of his favorite sky. She waited, the table set with their best china, the candles flickering, her heart a fragile mix of hope and apprehension. Adrian came home 3 hours late. He didn't even glance at the meticulously prepared dinner. His face was flushed with excitement, his eyes gleaming with a manic energy she didn't recognize. He tossed a thick, cream-colored envelope onto the table, where it landed with a soft thud beside the uneaten breadsticks. "What is this?" Scarlett asked, her voice small. "That," he said, pulling at his tie, a triumphant grin playing on his lips, "is our future, or rather, my future." Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside were divorce papers. The sterile, legal language was a brutal counterpoint to the romantic dinner she had prepared. The words blurred, but the message was clear. Irreconcilable differences. No fault. A clean break. Signed, Adrian. "I don't understand," she stammered, looking up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain. "Our anniversary." "Oh, Scarlett, please," he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so naive. Did you really think this was working? This small, pathetic life? I'm meant for more. I've been given an opportunity, a real one, and I can't have you holding me back." The name on the legal documents, the petitioner opposite hers, was a name he had mentioned with increasing frequency, always with a tone of reverence. Genevieve Thorne, heiress to the Thorne banking fortune in New York. A woman whose photograph was a society page staple, always draped in jewels and haute couture. A woman of resources. The pieces of his recent behavior snapped together with sickening clarity. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the scent of Chanel No. 5 clinging to his shirts. He hadn't just fallen out of love with her. He had been actively replacing her. "You're leaving me for her?" Maeve's voice was barely a whisper. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice piercing her chest. "Leaving you?" "Honey, that implies we were on the same level to begin with," he said, his cruelty absolute. He began pacing the small living room, his movements suddenly too grand for the space. "Genevieve understands me. She understands ambition. Her father, Mr. Harrison Thorne, is willing to make me a senior partner in his new private equity venture. This is the big league, Scarlett. This is where I belong." He finally stopped and looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her simple dress, her tear-streaked face with undisguised pity. "Look, I'll be fair. The house has equity, but there's some capital. You can keep it. You can keep the car. It should be enough for a woman with your simple needs. Think of it as severance pay for 7 years of service. 7 years of service, not love, not partnership. Service." The words echoed in the sudden silence of the room. He saw her as an employee he was now firing. The love she had poured into his life, the sacrifices she had made, the identity she had discarded. It was all worthless to him. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had invalidated her entire existence. "I gave you everything," she said, the words choked in her throat by unshed tears. Adrian laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "You gave me nothing, Scarlett. You had nothing to give. That's the whole problem." He picked up his briefcase, not the worn leather one she had bought him 5 years ago, but a new, sleek aluminum one she had never seen before. A gift, no doubt, from Genevieve. He paused at the door, turning back to deliver one last crushing blow. "I hope you find a quiet life for yourself," he said, his voice laced with condescending magnanimity. "Maybe you can work at that library you like so much. It suits you. Just sign the papers. It's better for everyone if we do this quickly and cleanly." The door closed behind him, leaving Scarlett alone in the flickering candlelight. The smell of the bolognese sauce she had so lovingly prepared suddenly felt nauseating. The beautiful meal was a monument to her own foolishness. He thought he was leaving a penniless orphan in his wake. He thought he was shedding dead weight to soar to the stratosphere of the elite. He had no idea of the storm he had just unleashed. In that moment, as the last vestiges of her love for him died, something else took its place. The pain was still there, a raw, open wound. But underneath, a different feeling began to simmer. It was cold, hard, and utterly unfamiliar. It was rage. Sinclair-sized rage. She looked at the divorce papers on the dining table, the legal instrument of her humiliation. "Cleanly and quickly," he had said. She picked up her phone, her hands surprisingly steady. She scrolled through her contacts, past the local plumber and the dentist, to a name she hadn't called in 7 years. The screen glowed with 2 words. William Ruiz. Her thumb hovered over the call button. The woman who would make the call would not be the heartbroken wife in the blue dress. It would be the billionaire heiress he never knew existed. The game was over. The war was about to begin. 3. The unleashing of the Titan. The first 24 hours after Adrian left were a blur of hollow-eyed shock. Scarlett didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. A vast, empty cavern where her heart used to be. She moved through the house like a ghost, their home now a museum of his shared lies. She took a black trash bag and, with cold, methodical precision, swept every photo, every gift, every last trace of him into it. It wasn't catharsis. It was an exorcism. By dawn, the house was stripped of their shared past, as empty as she felt inside. She finally allowed herself to look in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes, usually so full of soft warmth, were dark and haunted. She was wearing one of Adrian's old, faded t-shirts as a nightgown. This was the woman he had discarded, the weak, plain, penniless orphan. He had created this version of her, and he had destroyed it. It was time for Scarlett Sinclair to come home. She showered, the hot water a blessed shock to her system. She dressed not in her usual modest attire, but in the one emergency outfit she had kept hidden in the back of her closet, a pair of black, tailored trousers, a silk blouse, and a pair of plain but elegant leather flats. They were remnants of her old life, a contingency she had prayed she would never need. Then she made the call. The phone rang only once before a familiar voice, crisp and calm as ever, answered. "William Ruiz speaking." "William," she said, her own voice sounding rusty and strange to her ears. "It's me." There was a pause, an instant of stunned silence on the other end of the line. William Ruiz, the gray-haired, impeccably dressed head of Sinclair Legal, had been her father's closest confidant and had managed her family's affairs with unwavering loyalty for over 30 years. He was more of a father to her than her own had ever been. "Scarlett," he finally breathed, the name a mixture of surprise, relief, and deep, inexpressible concern. "My dear, are you all right?" "No," she said, the single word conveying a world of hurt. "I'm not, but I will be." She took a deep breath, the air in the sterile house feeling charged with a new energy. "William, I'm coming back. I want you to execute Protocol Alpha immediately." Protocol Alpha, the code name they had devised years ago for the dissolution of the blind trust and the full reinstatement of her legal identity and financial power. It was the emergency button, the glass to break in case of catastrophe. "Consider it done," William said, his voice instantly shifting from worried guardian to ruthlessly efficient executive. "A car will be at your location in an hour. We have the penthouse at the Four Seasons in New York City ready for you. Your security detail is being mobilized as we speak. What are your immediate instructions?" "The house," she said, looking at the small suburban box that had been her cage. "Sell it. Donate the contents to charity. I don't want to see anything from this life again." She paused, her gaze dropping to the divorce papers still on the dining table. "And William, I need you to find out everything there is to know about a man named Harrison Thorne and his private equity ventures. I also want a full dossier on his daughter, Genevieve, and my ex-husband, Adrian Clark." "I already have a preliminary file on the Thornes," William said, his tone grim. "Harrison has been trying to make inroads against Sinclair Shipping for years. This is no coincidence, Scarlett. It appears your husband was fished as a valuable asset." The clinical business term was somehow more insulting than any emotional betrayal. She wasn't just left. She was strategically eliminated. "I understand," she said, her voice hardening. "One more thing, William. The divorce papers. Do not let Adrian's attorney file them. You will handle the proceedings." "With pleasure," William said, a hint of steel in his voice. "We will file for adultery and fraud. His petition will be buried. He won't know what hit him." An hour later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car so out of place in Savannah, it might as well have been a spacecraft, pulled silently up to her curb. A man in an impeccable suit, her new head of security, opened the door for her. As Scarlett slid into the luxurious leather interior, she took one last look at the house, the quiet street, the life that was now nothing more than a bad dream. She did not look back as the car sped toward the private airfield, where a Sinclair Global jet waited. Scarlett's phone. A new high-end satellite model provided by her security sprang to life. It was an encrypted message from William. Attached was a single document, the summary of Sinclair Global's holdings. Line after line of incomprehensible numbers, company names, and market values stretching into the billions. At the bottom was the net worth of the estate she now fully controlled, $257.4 billion. She stared at the number not with joy or triumph, but with a chilling sense of purpose. Adrian had left her for a woman with resources. He had disparaged her for having nothing. He had built his future on the foundation of her supposed poverty. He wanted to play in the big leagues. She was about to show him he wasn't even in the same sport. The penniless orphan was dead. Scarlett Sinclair, the billionaire industrial titan, had returned from the ashes, and she was coming to collect a 7-year debt of pain and humiliation, with interest. 4. The Ice Queen reappears. The transformation from Scarlett Hayes, the suburban wife, to Scarlett Sinclair, the formidable CEO, was swift and absolute. It began the moment she stepped onto the tarmac in New York and into the rarefied air of her former life. The penthouse at the Four Seasons, overlooking the majestic expanse of Central Park, was her chrysalis. It was a world of silent, efficient staff, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the ambient hum of immense power. William Ruiz was waiting for her, standing next to a large mahogany table covered in files and electronic tablets. He looked older than she remembered, but his eyes retained the same sharp intelligence and unwavering loyalty. He did not hug her or offer platitudes. He simply gave her a small, respectful nod. "Welcome back, Ms. Sinclair," he said. The title, so foreign for so long, settled upon her like a perfectly tailored suit. "It's good to be back, William." The first few days were a blur of intense briefings. She was a fast study, her mind so long occupied by domestic trivia, proving to be as sharp and analytical as her father's. She absorbed 7 years of market fluctuations, technological advancements, and corporate strategy with a ravenous appetite. She wasn't just catching up, she was preparing for war. The physical transformation unfolded in parallel. The plain, unassuming woman from Savannah was systematically erased. A team of New York's best stylists, trainers, and nutritionists descended upon the penthouse. Her long, unstyled hair was cut into a sharp, elegant bob that framed her face and emphasized her cheekbones. Her wardrobe of faded jeans and cotton sweaters was replaced by a carefully curated collection of Tom Ford power suits, sleek Dior gowns, and dangerously high Christian Louboutin stilettos. Her new uniform was an armor. Every piece was chosen to project an aura of untouchable power and icy elegance. She learned to walk with a new posture, a straight-backed confidence that commanded attention. The soft, gentle cadence of her speech was honed into a precise, measured tone that brooked no argument. Within a week, she was ready. Her reemergence would not be a discreet affair. It would be a statement. William had organized an emergency board meeting of Sinclair Global, a collection of powerful aging men who had grown comfortable in her absence, managing the empire under William's firm hand, but without a true Sinclair at the helm. She walked into the Sinclair Global boardroom on the 80th floor of their New York skyscraper, the click of her heels on the marble floor, the only sound in the cavernous room. All conversation ceased. The 12 board members, titans of industry in their own right, stared at her as if they had seen a ghost. They remembered a quiet, grieving teenager. They were unprepared for the woman standing before them now. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice cold and steady as she took her place at the head of the table, her father's seat. I apologize for my long absence. I was otherwise engaged. Rest assured, my sabbatical is over." She didn't wait for their responses. She launched straight into a brilliant and ruthless analysis of the company's performance, pointing out missed opportunities, bloated divisions, and a lack of aggressive innovation. She laid out a bold, new vision for Sinclair Global, one that involved a major push into sustainable energy and a strategic acquisition of a cutting-edge AI firm. She had their full, undivided attention. The sleepy, complacent energy in the room had been replaced by a palpable tension, a mixture of fear and grudging admiration. But her grand strategy had a more personal, more specific target. "Finally," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I've reviewed the file on Thorn Bank's recent ventures. Their attempts to undermine our shipping logistics are amateurish, but persistent. It's time we sent a message." She brought up a new file on the large screen at the front of the room. It was an innovative, mid-sized logistics firm called LogiNext. LogiNext has developed a predictive shipping algorithm that could revolutionize the industry, she explained. The Thorns have been trying to acquire them for the past 6 months. Their offer is currently stalled at $900 million. She paused, letting the information sink in. "This morning," she continued, a shadow of a smile touching her lips, "Sinclair Global submitted a competing offer for $1.5 billion, all cash. The deal will close by Friday." A ripple of shock and excitement ran through the room. It was an aggressive, almost ecclesiastic. It was a direct, public attack on Harrison Thorne's beau. "Furthermore," Scarlett said, her gaze turning to ice, "I've looked into the Thorne's new private equity firm. It's a vanity project for his daughter and her new associate." She let the word hang in the air. "It appears they are focusing their initial investments on the luxury hospitality sector." She clicked to another slide, this one detailing a portfolio of boutique hotels. "We will begin a systematic acquisition of key properties in every market they target. We will outbid them, absorb their targets, and exhaust their seed capital before they sign their first deal. I want their firm to be a total failure. Is that clear?" The board members, once skeptical, now looked at her with a newfound respect that bordered on fear. This was not Edward Sinclair's daughter. This was a predator. As the session adjourned, William lingered behind. "A bold re-entry, Scarlett," he said, a gleam of pride in his eye. "You've reminded them who's in charge." "I wasn't talking to them, William," she said, looking out the window at the city below, a concrete jungle where only the strong survived. "I was talking to him." She knew the news of the LogiNext acquisition would hit the financial world like thunder. Harrison Thorne would be furious, and Adrian, so proud of his new position, his new life, would be right in the blast radius. He wanted to be in the big leagues. She had just changed the rules of his game, and he didn't even know he was playing against her. The awful reckoning. 2 months passed. Adrian Clark was living the life he had always dreamed of. He and Genevieve Thorne were the city's new power couple. They had just moved into a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue, a wedding gift from her father. Adrian had a new title, Senior Vice President of Thorne Private Equity, a corner office with a panoramic city view and a wardrobe of custom-tailored suits. He was, finally, in his own mind, a success. Yet, a shadow loomed over his new paradise. Their first major undertaking, a fund to acquire luxury boutique hotels, had been a spectacular failure. Every target they identified, every deal they pursued, was inexplicably snatched away at the last minute by an unseen, heavily resourced competitor. Rumors on Wall Street whispered about a newly aggressive Sinclair Global, but the moves were so precise, so targeted, They felt personal. Harrison Thorne was losing capital and prestige, and the pressure leaked directly to Adrian. "It's a ghost," Harrison had snarled at him in one board meeting. "Someone is playing games with us, and you, with your fancy Ivy League degree, can't seem to find out who." Tonight, however, was supposed to be a reprieve, a celebration of their status. It was the annual Stars Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the absolute pinnacle of New York's social calendar. For Adrian, this was his true arrival. He stood beside Genevieve, her neck draped in Thorne diamonds, basking in the flash of cameras and the fawning greetings of the city's elite. He felt a surge of vindication. This was his place. He thought for a fleeting moment of Scarlett. He imagined her in her small Savannah house, probably watching some cheap TV show, completely oblivious to the glittering world he now inhabited. The thought filled him with smug satisfaction. He had made the right choice. The grand doors to the main dining hall burst open. A silence fell over the crowd, a sudden, collective catching of breath. The sea of famous faces parted for a new figure to pass. She wore a glittering, midnight blue silk gown that clung to her like a second skin. A single, dazzling diamond necklace resting on her collarbone. The legendary Sinclair star rested at her throat, catching the light and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Her dark hair was styled into an impeccable, sharp bob, and her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the room, missing nothing. She was flanked by two men, the venerable William Ruiz and Mr. Kenji Tanaka, the brilliant, reclusive CEO of a rival tech empire, a man who rarely made public appearances. Her presence radiated an almost gravitational pull of power and influence. Adrian's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. His blood ran cold. The face was familiar, but the woman was an impossibility. It was Scarlett. But it wasn't. It was as if his quiet, simple wife had been possessed by the spirit of a vengeful goddess. "Who is that?" Genevieve hissed beside him, her voice tight with jealousy and intrigue. "I've never seen her before." A portly, red-faced banker, who had been fawning over them moments before, chuckled nervously. "You've been out of the country too long, Genevieve. That's not just anyone. That's Scarlett Sinclair." The name hit Adrian like a physical blow. Sinclair. Sinclair Global. The ghost in the machine that had been systematically dismantling his professional life. It couldn't be. It was a joke. A nightmare. "Sinclair?" Genevieve repeated, her perfectly sculpted brows rising. "The Scarlett Sinclair? I thought she was a recluse. A ghost." "Well," the banker said, his eyes fixed on the approaching trio. "The ghost is back, and apparently she's friends with Kenji Tanaka. Rumor has it they're working on a merger. Can you imagine? Sinclair Global and Tanaka Industries? They could buy God." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world was reeling on its axis. All the pieces snapped into place with horrifying clarity. The failed hotel deals, the Loginext acquisition, the inexplicable, personal nature of the attacks on the Thorns. It had all been her. As if sensing his gaze, Scarlett's eyes met his across the crowded room. There was not a flicker of recognition, not a hint of their shared past. Her gaze was one of complete indifference, the kind one might give to a piece of furniture or a particularly uninteresting insect. That look was more devastating than any shout or accusation could have been. It told him he was nothing to her. She, Kenji, and William moved through the room, a powerful whirlwind. The people Adrian had been desperate to impress were now bending over backward to get a moment of her time. Harrison Thorne, Genevieve's formidable father, approached Scarlett with a tense, obsequious smile. "Ms. Sinclair," Harrison said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. A pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Harrison Thorne. Scarlett extended a cool, gloved hand. Mr. Thorne, I've been following your recent difficulties in the market. Most unfortunate. Her voice was pure silk, but the words were pure venom. Harrison's face tightened. Indeed, it seems we have quite the aggressive new player to deal with. Aggression is merely another word for efficiency, Scarlett countered softly, before turning her full attention to Kenji Tanaka, dismissing the Thorne patriarch as if he were a junior associate. Genevieve watched, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. She turned to Adrian, her voice a poisonous whisper. You know her, don't you? How do you know Scarlett Sinclair? Adrian couldn't speak. His throat was dry. His mind was a chaotic symphony of denial and terror. Genevieve's eyes narrowed, a shrewd, calculating light entering them. She looked from Adrian's ashen face to the magnificent figure of Scarlett Sinclair, and then back again. A slow, mounting horror spread across her features. Oh my God, she breathed, the realization hitting her. She's your ex-wife, the poor, pathetic orphan you told me about. It was her. Adrian could only nod, a single jerking motion. The smug satisfaction he had felt minutes before had curdled into abject terror. He hadn't just divorced a simple woman from the suburbs. He had betrayed, humiliated, and discarded the most powerful woman in the room. He thought he was climbing a ladder. Instead, he had just jumped off a cliff, and he was only just starting to realize how far he had to fall. Sick. The final lesson. In the weeks following the gala, Adrian's life crumbled with brutal speed. The Sinclair name was a death sentence to his career at the Thorns. Harrison, humiliated and furious, treated him with open contempt. Genevieve, seeing him now not as a prize, but as the world's biggest fool, was cold and distant. Their relationship devolved into a series of bitter whispered arguments in their cavernous, silent penthouse. Social invitations dried up. Fawning colleagues now avoided his gaze. He was a pariah, a walking cautionary tale. Scarlett, meanwhile, operated from a sphere so far above him that he could only watch the fallout. She was a fixture in the financial news, an industry supernova. The Sinclair-Tanaka merger was being hailed as the deal of the century, creating a global giant that dwarfed all competitors. Every move she made was precise, strategic, and devastatingly effective. But amidst the corporate warfare and financial machinations, Scarlett found herself feeling empty. Vengeance, though satisfying, was a hollow victory. She had dismantled Adrian's world, but it hadn't filled the void in hers. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge from her own thoughts, she did something she hadn't done in years. She went incognito to a small, independent art gallery in New York's East Village. Dressed in simple jeans, a cashmere sweater, and a pulled-down baseball cap, she was no one. She was just a woman looking at art. The gallery was quiet, the air smelling of linseed oil and turpentine. The art was raw, powerful, and full of a desperate, beautiful energy. She was particularly drawn to a series of large, abstract canvases, chaotic swirls of black, white, and a defiant, electric blue. They spoke to the storm within her own soul. They have something special, don't they? The voice, low and resonant, startled her. She turned to see a man standing next to her. He was tall, with kind, intelligent eyes and paint-stained hands. He wore a paint-splattered t-shirt and worn jeans. He looked at the paintings, not at her, with a look of deep understanding on his face. "They're honest," Scarlett replied, the words surprising herself. "That's him," the man said, nodding toward a figure in the corner, the artist, who was talking animatedly with a prospective buyer. "Leo O'Connell. He paints like he's trying to claw his way out of a locked room, all passion and fury." The man finally turned his gaze to her, a warm, genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I'm the owner, David. David Martin." Scarlett, caught off guard, introduced herself simply as Elena. Over the next hour, David walked her through the gallery, talking about the art. Not with the pretentious jargon of the elite art world, but with a simple, heartfelt passion. He saw the story in every brushstroke, the emotion behind every color choice. He didn't ask her what she did, where she lived, or who she knew. He simply talked to her about art. She felt a part of herself she thought was dead begin to stir. It was the art history student from college, the young woman who had been captivated by beauty and creation, not by balance sheets and market caps. She found herself returning to the gallery several times over the next few weeks. She and David developed an easy rapport. Their conversations moved from art to books, to music, to the simple absurdities of life in New York. With him, she wasn't a Sinclair. She was just Elena, a woman with a keen eye and a quiet sadness he didn't pry into. He was a welcome anchor in the turbulent sea of her new life. Meanwhile, an unexpected new player entered the game. Kenji Tanaka, her new business partner, was not the cold, reclusive genius the media portrayed. In their private meetings, she discovered a man with a dry wit, a fierce intellect, and an almost unnerving ability to see through her carefully constructed armor. During one late-night strategy session in the Sinclair Global boardroom, as they finalized the details of the merger, he suddenly stopped, looking at her over the rim of his teacup. "You've enjoyed this, haven't you?" he asked, his dark eyes intense. "Dismantling the thorns, humiliating your ex-husband." Scarlett stiffened. It was a necessary business strategy. Kenji allowed a small, knowing smile. "Of course, but revenge is a fire that consumes the person wielding it, Ms. Sinclair. It will keep you warm for a while, but eventually, you're left with only ashes." He set down his cup. "Harrison Thorne is an old fool. Your husband is an insignificant parasite. They are not worthy of the energy you are spending on them. This pan, our company, that is worthy of your energy. The future we can build is worthy of it." His words struck a chord deep within her. He wasn't judging her. He was challenging her. He saw her, not as a weapon of revenge, but as a brilliant leader. And he was calling her to be better. He was the first person in her new life to talk about the future, not the past. "What do you propose?" she asked. Her voice low. "I propose we stop playing defense," he said, his eyes glowing with a new intensity. "Let's build something revolutionary. Focus our resources on the new sustainable energy division. Let's create something that changes the world, not just settles old scores. That is a victory worthy of a Sinclair and a Tanaka." It was a turning point. Kenji's challenge, combined with the simple human connection she was finding with David at the art gallery, began to shift her perspective. The rage that had fueled her was beginning to cool, replaced by a new, more compelling ambition. She had proven she could destroy. Now she was starting to wonder if she could build again. The war against Adrian and the Thorns was won, but the battle for her own soul, for the woman she wanted to become, was just beginning. And for the first time, she felt she didn't have to fight it alone. She had found allies, not in bankers and lawyers, but in the quiet gallery of an artist and across a boardroom table from a man who saw her future, not just her past. 7. The Unconditional Victory. Adrian Clarke's freefall was swift and brutal. Fired from the Thorns, he became toxic on the financial scene. His lavish lifestyle evaporated after a nasty annulment from Genevieve, which even forced him to legally change his last name to cut ties with her family. Shattered, stripped of his identity, he moved into a dreary apartment upstate, where his ambition festered into a dangerous obsession. In his twisted logic, Scarlett owed him for waking her up, and he convinced himself he could still get her back. He began a campaign of pathetic harassment, dozens of pleading and then threatening emails and voicemails, all intercepted by William's team. When his messages went unanswered, his desperation pushed him to stalk her. One afternoon, he evaded security, confronting her in the private elevator lobby as she was leaving with Kenji Tanaka. "Scarlett!" he shouted, his appearance disheveled, his eyes wild. She looked at the hollow shell of the man she had married. "Adrian," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You need to stop this." "Stop this?" He laughed hysterically. "I'm just getting started. You think you can ruin me and walk away? I know the real you, the scared woman playing dress-up. This isn't you." Kenji stepped slightly in front of her. "I think you should leave." Adrian's gaze filled with hate. "And who are you? Her new pet?" Scarlett cut him off, her voice like ice. "He is my partner, Adrian. Something you never were." She turned and left without a second glance. The public rejection pushed him over the edge. If he couldn't have her, he would destroy her. He sold a twisted, fabricated story to a notorious tabloid journalist, Mr. Marco Fernandez, painting himself as the victim of a manipulative, mentally unstable heiress. "She hid her billions to trap an unsuspecting husband," the headline screamed, the story filled with intimate, distorted details designed to give it credibility. Simultaneously, Harrison Thorne, seeking revenge, fed damaging stories to the financial press, questioning Scarlett's stability and fitness to run a global empire. The combined assault was a perfect storm. Sinclair Global's stock took a minor hit, and whispers about Scarlett's sanity began circulating in the markets. She was in a meeting with William and Kenji when the news broke. William was apoplectic, planning a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Scarlett, however, was eerily calm as she read the article. Inside, the cold rage from the night Adrian left her solidified. He had weaponized their intimacy, twisting the life she built from love into something pathological. "Don't sue them, William," she said quietly. "Scarlett, we must," he insisted. "We can't let this stand." "No," she said, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous new light. "A lawsuit is a battle. He has declared a war. And in a war, you don't file paperwork. You demand unconditional surrender." She turned to Kenji, a chilling smile on her face. "He thinks he can control the narrative by exposing our past. He's forgotten one detail. I know all of his secrets too, and unlike him, I have the proof." The time for reacting was over. Adrian and the Thorns had pushed her too far, mistaking her restraint for weakness. Now she would show them what real power looked like. She would end this not by winning, but by annihilating them completely. Scarlett's counterattack was not a single explosive event, but a masterfully orchestrated symphony of destruction. It began quietly. She unleashed the full, terrifying power of the Sinclair Global Legal and Intelligence Divisions, the teams William Ruiz had kept sharp. Her first target was Marco Fernandez and his tabloid. Within days, Sinclair Global's investigators had unearthed a career's worth of corruption. William didn't file a lawsuit. He personally delivered the complete, damning file to the district attorney's office. Fernandez was arrested, and the story he had written about Scarlett was publicly discredited. Next, she turned her attention to Harrison Thorne. While he had been busy sowing stories of her instability, Scarlett's team had been conducting a deep forensic audit of the entire Thorne bank operation. They found a pattern of insider trading and fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. William Ruiz set up a private meeting with the Thorne board, excluding Harrison. He laid out the evidence, explaining that Sinclair Global now held a controlling stake in the Thorne debt. The message was clear. Either Harrison Thorne was ousted, or Sinclair Global would release the evidence and call their debt, an act that would vaporize the Thorne legacy. Within 24 hours, the board announced Harrison was stepping down due to health reasons. His attack on Scarlett had cost him his empire. The final piece of her strategy was reserved for Adrian. It would be the most public, most devastating blow of all. She agreed to her first televised interview with Ms. Sarah Jenkins, a legendary journalist known for her tough questioning. The interview aired live, in prime time. Scarlett walked out looking serene and powerful in a simple white dress. For the first half, she spoke eloquently about her vision for Sinclair Global. Then, Jenkins shifted gears. Ms. Sinclair, I have to ask you about the recent very public attacks on your character. Your ex-husband, Adrian Clark, has made some very serious accusations. Scarlett looked directly into the camera, her expression one of sad resolve. He did, she said calmly. Adrian and I were married for 7 years. At his request, I lived a life separate from my family's resources. I did this because I was in love. The story he told was a painful, twisted version of our life. But what he failed to mention was the reason our marriage ended. From a folder, she pulled out an affidavit detailing Adrian's affair with Genevieve Thorne, which began over a year before their divorce. Then she showed emails between Adrian and Harrison Thorne, outlining the plan to trade up his penniless wife for a senior role at the firm. He didn't just leave me, Scarlett stated. He sold me. The control room was in stunned silence, but she wasn't finished. Mr. Clark has accused me of ruining him. The truth is, he was never the man he pretended to be. She slid his old credit card statements across the table. These detail thousands of dollars spent on luxury items, while he told me we couldn't afford to fix a leak in our roof. And this, she held up one last sheet, is his college application, where he lied about being an orphan long before he met me. Adrian Clark's entire life has been a calculated fraud. She looked back at the camera, her eyes clear. I didn't destroy that man. I simply held up a mirror. My only fault was loving someone incapable of loving anyone but himself. I've paid the price for that mistake, and now, so has he. She ended the interview by announcing the launch of the Sinclair Foundation, a $2 billion trust to support victims of emotional and financial abuse. In his apartment, Adrian watched his world collapse. She had exposed him completely. The reckoning was final. In the aftermath, the world saw Scarlett as a paragon of strength. Sinclair Global stock soared. Adrian, a social leper, disappeared, rumored to be working a low-level job in some obscure province, a ghost of his own ambitions. Scarlett's life, for the first time, was truly her own. The rage had subsided, leaving peace. The empire was no longer a burden, but a tool to innovate and build. Under her and Kenji Tanaka's leadership, the newly merged Sinclair Tanaka Global became a world leader in sustainable technology. Her work was her passion, a legacy that would dwarf the petty dramas of her past. Her partnership with Kenji was one of deep mutual respect and shared vision, but it was outside the boardroom where she found the quiet joy that had so long eluded her. She continued her visits to David Martin's art gallery, always as Elena. He remained a grounding force, drawn to her quiet intelligence and resilient spirit, knowing nothing of her immense power. One crisp fall afternoon, a year after her return, they were walking through Central Park. "You look lighter," David observed. Scarlett smiled. "I feel lighter. There's something I need to tell you. My name isn't Elena." She told him everything. The Sinclair name, the hidden life, the betrayal, the return. David listened patiently. When she finished, a long silence stretched between them. "So," he finally said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "does this mean I have to start calling you Ms. Sinclair?" Scarlett laughed, a sound of pure relief. I prefer Scarlett. Well, Scarlett, he said, his eyes shining. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Now, are you going to finish that coffee or are you going to use your billions to buy the entire cart? In that moment, standing in the heart of the city she now commanded, she felt a profound sense of completeness. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged not just victorious, but whole. She was surrounded by people who saw her for who she truly was. Kenji, who respected her mind. David, who cherished her spirit. She had lost a fantasy built on a lie, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable, a reality of her own making. The hidden heiress was gone forever, replaced by a woman who stood proudly in the light, the master of her own vast, brilliant and limitless horizon. Call to action. Closing. Engage and subscribe. She was betrayed, shattered, and left with nothing. Or so he thought. Scarlett Sinclair's incredible journey, from hidden wife to billionaire powerhouse, is a testament to the unbreakable strength of a woman scorned. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the entire game. Her story proves that your past doesn't define you, and the deepest betrayals can forge the most powerful versions of ourselves. She took her pain and turned it into a global empire, and her heartbreak into a beacon of hope for others. If this story of resilience and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please give us a like. Share this tale with someone who needs a dose of inspiration. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable, real-life dramas.